There is a moment somewhere in the quiet after a relationship with a narcissistic person ends when you notice something that doesn't fit the story you were told. You were made to feel disposable, replaceable, forgettable. And yet somehow this person cannot seem to fully let you go. They circle back, they watch from a distance, they find reasons to appear, then disappear, then reappear again. And if you have felt confused by this, if some part of you has wondered whether it means they secretly loved you all along, I want you to stay with me because what you are about to understand is one of the most misread dynamics in the entire landscape of narcissistic relationships. Obsession is real, but it is almost never what the survivor first assumes it to be. Before we go deeper into this, I want to gently invite you to subscribe to this channel because the work we do here is not about surface level advice or quick emotional relief. It is about understanding the machinery underneath these patterns so clearly that you can never be pulled back into confusion again. If that is the kind of clarity you are looking for, this is a place worth staying. Now, let us begin with the distinction that changes everything. Because if you miss this one idea, every behavior we discuss afterward will be interpreted through the wrong lens. Love, in any psychologically healthy sense, seeks the well being of the other person, even when it is inconvenient. Regret involves genuine remorse, a felt sense of having harmed someone, and a desire to repair without expecting anything in return. Healthy attachment allows for closeness while still respecting separateness. Obsession, in the narcissistic sense, does none of these things. It is not oriented toward your happiness. It is oriented toward your responsiveness. The obsession is not with you as a full human being with your own inner world. It is with the role you played in regulating theirs. And once you understand that difference, the strange behaviors stop looking like buried affection and start looking like exactly what they are, which is a struggle to restore a lost source of control. Consider what a narcissistic dynamic actually provided the other person while you were inside it. There was a steady supply of attention, reaction, reassurance, and emotional labor. You likely spent enormous energy managing their moods, anticipating their needs, softening their disappointments, and absorbing their projections. To them, that arrangement was not experienced as your suffering. It was experienced as stability. You were, in a very real psychological sense, a regulating presence, a mirror that reflected back the version of themselves they needed to believe in. When you left, or when you stopped playing that role, even while physically present, that mirror went dark. And people who depend on external mirrors to feel real do not simply move on when one shatters. They go looking for it. That searching is what we so often mislabel as longing. Now, here is where observation matters more than interpretation, and I want to be careful with you here. A single behavior does not diagnose anyone. People reach out to former partners for many ordinary reasons. What we are looking at is not one isolated act, but a recognizable pattern that repeats over time, especially a pattern that intensifies at very specific moments. So, as I describe these behaviors, hold them loosely. Notice the shape of the whole, not the meaning of any single gesture. One of the clearest signals is the return that arrives precisely when you have started to feel free. You might go weeks or months with silence, doing the difficult work of rebuilding yourself. And then, almost as if timed to your recovery, a message appears, a casual hello, a memory they claim just crossed their mind, a question that pretends to be innocent. What makes this significant is not the message itself, but the timing of it. Narcissistic obsession is often exquisitely sensitive to your emotional availability. When you are grieving and reachable, they may stay away because there is no challenge in what is already accessible. But the moment you become genuinely unavailable, the moment your energy turns inward toward your own life, something shifts. Your independence registers as a loss of control, and control is the thing they are trying to recover. This is why so many survivors describe a maddening paradox. The more you heal, the more they seem to want you. It feels like proof that you mattered. In truth, it is proof of something else entirely. To a person organized around dominance, your emotional detachment is not acceptable because detachment means you are no longer under their influence. Your calm is experienced as rejection. Your peace is experienced as defiance. And so they escalate, not out of love, but out of a need to prove to themselves that they still occupy space in your mind. The obsession is fed by your freedom, which is one of the cruelest ironies of this entire experience, and also, if you understand it correctly, one of the most liberating things you can ever grasp. Then there is the pattern of indirect contact, the watching from behind glass. Perhaps they never message you directly, but they consistently appear in the periphery of your life. They stay connected to mutual friends and steer conversations towards you. They view everything you post while never engaging. They seem to know details about your life they should have no reason to know. This surveillance serves a function. It keeps you psychologically present to them without requiring vulnerability on their part. Direct contact carries the risk of rejection. Watching carries no such risk. It allows them to maintain the fantasy of ongoing connection while risking nothing. And it allows them to monitor whether you are truly moving on, because your moving on is the outcome they are most working to prevent. Closely tied to this is the attempt to provoke a reaction. If silence and monitoring do not draw you back, some individuals shift towards stirring your emotions directly. They may say something calculated to wound, or resurface an old conflict, or post something clearly designed to reach you. Understand the logic underneath this. To someone who feeds on emotional response, your anger is not a failure. Your tears are not a defeat. Any strong reaction from you is a success because it confirms your continued entanglement. Indifference is the only response they cannot use. A person who has truly let go does not perform their letting go for an audience. They simply feel less. And that quiet reduction of feeling is precisely what the obsessive individual is trying to disturb, because your neutrality threatens the entire premise that you still belong to their story. If you are finding that these patterns are naming experiences you have struggled to put into words, I want to remind you again that you can subscribe to keep walking through this material with me. What we are building here is not just recognition, but the kind of understanding that becomes armor, so that these dynamics lose their power to disorient you. Let us talk now about what happens when you move forward into a new relationship, or even simply into a happier and more autonomous life, because this is where obsession often reveals itself most nakedly. Jealousy in this context is rarely about romantic loss. It is about the intolerable idea that someone else now receives what they consider theirs. To a person who related to you as a possession rather than a partner, your happiness with anyone else is experienced almost as theft. You may notice sudden renewed interest the instant they learn you are seeing someone. You may notice attempts to insert doubt, to subtly compete, to remind you of the past, to position themselves as the one who truly understood you. This competition is not about winning your heart. It is about not losing the contest, because to them, the relationship was always, on some level, a contest for control. There is another behavior that quietly does enormous damage, and that is the rewriting of history. Over time, you may find that their version of your shared past no longer matches your own memory. The harm they caused is minimized or erased. Events are reshaped so they appear as the wounded party and you as the one who failed them. Sometimes this reaches you directly, and sometimes it travels through the network of people around you. This is not merely dishonesty. It serves a psychological purpose. A person whose self-image cannot tolerate genuine accountability must rewrite reality in order to preserve it. And when they do this, they are not only protecting their story, they are also attempting to draw you back into it, because if they can make you doubt your own memory, they have regained a foothold in your mind. This is why keeping faith with your own experience is not stubbornness. It is survival. Now, I want to address the rhythm that keeps so many people trapped, the cycle of silence followed by sudden reappearance. You may go through long stretches of complete quiet, long enough that you begin to believe it is finally over. And then, without warning, they return, often with warmth, sometimes with what sounds like an apology, occasionally with an intensity that feels like the person you first fell for. This intermittent pattern is not random, and it is not accidental. Unpredictable reward is one of the most powerful shapers of human behavior that exists. When affection arrives on an irregular schedule, the mind becomes hyper-focused on it, waiting, hoping, unable to fully release. If they were consistently cold, you could grieve and move on. If they were consistently warm, you would not be here. It is the alternation that binds. And whether or not the other person consciously understands this, the effect on you is the same. Part of healing is recognizing that the returning warmth is not evidence of change. It is often simply the next phase of a familiar loop. This brings us to the concept of hoovering, the repeated effort to pull you back into the relationship's gravity. It can wear many faces. It can look like crisis, a sudden emergency that only you can help with. It can look like nostalgia, a flood of memories about better times. It can look like transformation, declarations that they have finally understood everything and become someone new. It can even look like guilt, subtle suggestions that you are cruel or heartless for maintaining your distance. What unites all these forms is the underlying goal, which is reconnection on their terms, a reopening of the channel through which supply once flowed. And I want to be clear and compassionate here. Wanting to believe the transformed version is real is not weakness. It is one of the most human things about you. The longing for the relationship to have been worth your love is deeply understandable. But genuine change does not announce itself in a message designed to reestablish contact. Genuine change respects the distance you have asked for. So how do you tell the difference between real healing and being slowly drawn back into the cycle? The distinction lives in the direction of your attention. When you are healing, your focus turns increasingly toward your own life, your own growth, your own future. Thoughts of the other person may still arise, but they become smaller, less magnetic, less able to reorganize your day. When you are being pulled back, your attention keeps orbiting them. You find yourself analyzing their behavior, wondering what they meant, checking whether they have looked at your life, rehearsing what you might say. Healing feels like your center of gravity returning to yourself. The cycle feels like your center of gravity remaining lodged in them. Neither is a moral failing, but only one of them leads somewhere you can actually live. The most protective thing you can build here is not a wall of anger, but a foundation of emotional detachment. And these are not the same. Anger still keeps you tied because anger is a form of continued engagement, a rope pulled tight in the opposite direction. Detachment is the quiet loosening of the rope altogether. It is the moment their message arrives and you feel your pulse stay even. It is the recognition that you no longer need them to understand, to apologize, or to acknowledge what they did, because your reality no longer requires their confirmation. Detachment is not coldness. It is the return of your energy to its rightful owner, which is you. And it is worth saying plainly that this state is not reached by force of will alone. It is reached through the slow work of grieving, of rebuilding, of remembering who you were before this, and discovering who you are becoming after it. Boundaries are the practical shape that detachment takes in the world. A boundary is not a punishment, and it is not a message you send to change their behavior. It is a decision about what you will allow into your own life, enforced regardless of how they respond. The most powerful boundary in the presence of obsessive contact is often the one that removes the reward entirely, the closing of the channel, the refusal to supply reaction, engagement, or access. This is difficult precisely because obsession tends to escalate before it fades. When the supply is cut, there is often a surge of intensified effort, and many survivors mistake this surge for proof they did something wrong. It is the opposite. The escalation is evidence that the boundary is working, that it has touched the very control the other person is fighting to preserve. And here, near the end, I want to return to the question that may have brought you here in the first place, the quiet hope buried inside the confusion. Does their obsession mean you are special? Does it mean, despite everything, that you were loved in some real way? I want to answer this with as much honesty and gentleness as I can. Another person's fixation on you is not a measurement of your worth. It never was. Obsession reveals almost nothing about the person being obsessed over and almost everything about the person doing the obsessing. It reflects their unresolved need for control, their fragile dependence on external validation, their inability to tolerate the loss of a source that once stabilized a self they cannot hold together on their own. You were valuable, yes, but not in the way the obsession suggests. You were valuable as a full human being, and that value existed long before them and will continue long after them, entirely independent of whether they ever recognized it. The freedom you are looking for does not arrive on the day they finally stop. It arrives on the day their behavior stops meaning anything to you. It arrives when their reappearance becomes just an event, not an earthquake. When their silence becomes just quiet, not a puzzle to solve. When you realize that the story you are living is now yours to write, and that they have become a character who wandered off the page, still calling out for a role you have already stopped auditioning for. That is the moment the obsession loses all its gravity, not because they changed, but because you did. If this way of understanding these patterns has given you even a little more clarity, I would be honored if you subscribed and stayed, because there is so much more we can uncover together about how these dynamics form, how they release their grip, and how the self you thought you lost is far more intact than you have been led to believe. And that self, the one now beginning to turn back toward its own life, is exactly where the next part of this conversation begins.